right, it's 10 o'clock Saturday morning. The sun is out in Nashville. I think we may get rain a little bit later, thanks to the hurricanes. But anyway, our guest today is the CEO and president of NES, DeCosta Jenkins. DeCosta, thanks for being here.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So the way we just usually talk for a few minutes and make sure that everybody starts getting on, and then in just a couple minutes we'll get started. So how you doing during the pandemic? You hanging in there okay?
Well, Mr. Vice Mayor, this has been, a challenging time for all of us. But when people ask me how I'm doing, I tell them that as of today, I've survived a pandemic, or I'm surviving a pandemic. I've survived a derecho. I've survived a tornado, surviving civil unrest, and an economic recession. So that's a lot for anybody or any community to survive. But we're here and no complaints.
Good. Well, I very much.
So
go ahead.
If I may ask a question, how are you holding up?
I'm holding up. Thank you for asking. We're getting there. We've had our ups and downs, and we do the best we can. I think a lot of it is trying to deal with the stress and the understanding that there's a lot that we don't know about the pandemic, and every day is kind of a challenge. You're not sure what you may end up running into, and you've got lots of other things going on, and so you're trying to deal with all that at the same time. You're trying to make sure that the city is running as smoothly as possible. So I appreciate you asking. I look forward to the weekends, even though I know that sometimes we're working during the weekends. Gives you a chance to kind of have some stress relief. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate you asking. Let me ask you one other major question before we get started in just a minute. So I was just looking in your office. If you look to your left, it looks like you have like 3 or 4 pairs of scissors over there, just right behind you. Is that for like cutting rates? Well, I mean, what do you do with all that stuff? Why do you need so many pairs of scissors? I think I can never find any, but you've got a bunch of them.
Well, I mean, you just answered the question. I mean,
okay.
For whatever reason, when I need to find scissors, I normally can't find them. So when I do find them, I put them all in one place and over in the corner. And so, but they magically disappear right before I need them.
Well, you know what? I think I'm going to follow your lead and get a bunch this weekend and just put them in one place and then hope that they stay there. But I just noticed that, and it's like, well, that's interesting. Well, so we are ready to get started. Welcome, everybody. It is Saturday morning. Today is August the 29th. What happened to the month of August? It disappeared really, really quickly. I will tell people up front that we will not have a program next week because it's Labor Day. And here comes the airplanes over my head. But we will not be meeting next week. But in 2 weeks, we will have the interim chief of police, John Drake, will be our guest, and we're looking forward to that. But today we have DeCosta Jenkins, who is the president and CEO of Nashville Electric Service. Thank you, DeCosta, for being on. I was waiting for the new updated COVID numbers. I'll check those in a minute, but I don't have them yet. We have a couple of people on the line that I'd like to recognize. The comptroller, Justin Wilson, is on the call. We have council member Tom Druffel is on the call. He will be the new chair of education on Tuesday for the council. John Rutherford is on the call. He will be the new chair of the personnel committee for the council on Tuesday. And our county clerk, Brenda Wynn, is on the call. So thank you all for being on today. So DeCosta, let's just start out with, tell everybody, in case they don't know who you are, and I think most people do, but just a little bit about yourself. And then I'm going to ask how you got to NES, but just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'll cover both of those in my response. So, I tell people I'm the unicorn. I was born in zip code 37208. And if you've read the Brookings Institute report, it's the most incarcerated zip code in the nation. Uh, Went to what was then North High School, graduated from North High School, and then back then we had the University of Tennessee. I went, attended the University of Tennessee at night and got my degree. The degree came from Knoxville, but I actually attended at night school, then started work for the accounting firm back then of Touche Ross. I'm a recovering CPA. I've got an associate's degree in electrical engineering technology, but I worked at Touche, and then Touche Ross merged with Deloitte, and so it's now known as Deloitte. When I started back in 1979, it was the Big Eight. It's now the Big Four. But I was there until 1991. Worked on different clients, both public and private. Took two companies public. One of them was called Corrections Corporation. It's now called Core Civic. Came to NES in 91 as a chief financial officer. I stayed in that role until 2004, and then got promoted to president, and I've been in that role since then.
So, how did you just end up at NES? I mean, you kind of explained your transition, but was that just something you always wanted to do? I mean, you know, as you were working with them, is this something you felt like was the right step? Obviously, you've come over and you've been there for quite a bit, quite a long time.
I blame my wife. When you work in public accounting, the impetus is to move you around the country, and so they wanted to move me to Chicago, move from audit senior manager to a partnership opportunity. And my wife really did not want to go to Chicago. And you know, one of the things when you work in public accounting, you have a number of, you know, really good clients, and sometimes there are opportunities with those clients, and there was an opportunity at NES. And so knowing my wife and knowing her support group is her family. She's very committed to her family. NES was a great opportunity because I knew I wouldn't be moving to Chicago from NES. So that's how I ended up at NES.
All right. Well, so tell me generally about NES. I mean, obviously we all connected to our electrical power, but you know, how many employees do you have? How big is it? How far do you all reach out with power? How many homes are connected? That type of thing. Just generally, tell everybody kind of just an update on how large NES is.
So let me start with the Tennessee Valley Authority.
Okay.
So the Tennessee Valley Authority was created back in the 1930s to provide generation and transmission to the Tennessee Valley, and that includes all of Tennessee and 6 of the 7 surrounding states. And so from that, since TVA was responsible for generation and transmission, electric utilities, distribution utilities were created throughout Tennessee. So there are 105 co-ops and 55 munis. And NES is one of the second largest municipal with right at 420,000 customers. Our revenues are right at 1.4 billion. We have 1,000 employees. Yeah, the number changes from day to day, but it's right at 1,000. And we serve all of Davidson County and part of the 6 surrounding counties. It's about 700 pole miles total.
Okay. All right. So, and then also for people who don't know, I mean, obviously that's quite a bit of people, and quite a bit of people who are really, obviously, you know, depend on NES. The connection between NES and the metropolitan government of Nashville, how does it work? Either, you know, I know there's distinctions, but how do we all kind of work together?
Yeah, so NES was established under Appendix 3, Article 42 and 43 of the Metro Charter. And it established National Electric Service and a 5-member board. That 5-member board is appointed by the council, appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council.
Right.
And so as a councilman and a vice mayor, we work closely hand in hand because the council represents each of their districts, and we try to make sure that their needs are met. The governance structure of NES is fairly restricted. There are 5 board members, and they are in charge of everything. And so the authorities that are granted NES are very restricted by charter and by the TVA Act. So the reason why they did that is because the Electric Power Board has rate-making authority. They also can condemn property, and they also can cut trees. So they want to make sure that their authority is limited to those items so that they don't get into city responsibilities. And so we work closely with the Metro Council to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the city. And I think Laura Smith and Antonio Carroll, my 2 representatives down there. And so it's a partnership. And so there are some things that we can do and some things we can't do. And so TVA is not only our supplier of power, but they're also our regulator. So from time to time, we might get a request from a councilman or the city, and we'll have to run it through TVA regulatory to see if it's something we can do. And if it's something we can do, we'll do it. And if something we can't do, the city and the council, they've been very understanding in the constraints that are put on NES. But for the most part, I think it's a good working relationship.
Well, so I would say Laura and Antonia, I think I have on speed dial. So they have been exceptional to work with, and we get concerns and complaints just like everything else, and they always have been very helpful in terms of trying to deal with that. So we very much appreciate it. 5-member board selected by the mayor, approved by the council. Who's the chairman of the board right now?
The chairman of the board right now is Carolyn Schott. She's a local attorney. And the vice chair is a lady by the name of Irma Paz Bernstein. She's got a popsicle shop called Los Paletos. The other members of the board are Rob McCabe and Clint Gray. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to enjoy Slim and Husky's Pizza, but he's one of the principals in Slim and Husky's Pizza. And Rob is, I think everybody knows Rob, but those who don't know Rob, he's the chairman of Pinnacle Financial Partners. And we're pleased that next week, we're hopeful that Mike Vandenberg, law professor at Vanderbilt, is going before the council for appointment to the last board seat. That seat had been filled by Bo Campbell, who's a local attorney also.
So Mike, a big sustainability, green energy guy, is that right? Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so a very strong board. So let me ask you this: was Justin Wilson the comptroller once on this board?
You talking about the good-looking Justin Wilson?
Well, there's no good-looking Justin Wilson. I'm talking about the comptroller. I assume we're talking about the same one. Was he on this board at one point?
Yeah, Justin Wilson served on the board before he became comptroller. He chaired the board and he chaired the audit committee. And so Justin was a tremendous board member and a tremendous resource to NES, as Justin is wherever he goes. But one of the things that people ask me all the time is, why is he just so good looking?
Why is he just so good looking?
Right.
Well, I've never had anybody ask me that, and obviously he's on this call. I just, based upon the people you just told me who are on the board right now, it's like it has really, really increased the level. Obviously, it's increased since he was on it. So anyway, congratulations. I'm sure I'll get a call from Justin a little bit later. Tell me about how this thing all works in terms of how it's funded. I know you got a very large budget. how does NES get funded?
Well, I mean, we get funded through electric rates. We're completely self-governing. We don't receive any federal money. Now, with respect to, when there's a tornado or derecho, some major event like that, and FEMA declares a natural disaster area, then we'll get some federal reimbursement then. But otherwise, we're completely supported by electric rates. And so, as I explained, we've got 1,000 employees, and so we've got probably 600 or so that would be field people, and that includes meter operations, the line crews, the electricians, the carpenters, the people working in the substations, and the people that work in the manholes. And so then there's another 400 of support, and most of those are engineers, because planning for the distribution system is a big part of what we do. And so that's kind of the makeup of it. And so we do an annual budget. It's presented before the board members. We try to get it to them in May. And we have a 2-year approved capital budget, but a 5-year running capital budget, because most of our projects are major projects and they're long term.
Okay. Well, we'll get into that in just a few minutes, because there were a number of questions that we got this week about the growth and everything else. But let me ask you this, the rates, how are the rates established? I mean, are you looking at what you need to be able to operate the whole thing? Can rates go up? They can go down? I mean, how does all that work in terms of a given year?
Yeah, so 80 cents of every dollar we collect goes to TVA. And so we do a cost of service study, and we will look at what's required to run the utility. As a general rule, we'll raise rates 3 to 5% every 3 to 5 years, and a lot depends on what's going on with TVA. But we're a nonprofit entity, and so any monies we collect over and above operations go strictly for capital. And so our capital budget this year is right at $180 million. And that, just because Nashville's a growing city.
Okay, so let me ask you also, because there was a question about this, the diversity of the makeup of the employees at NES and the management team. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, we try to, we have affirmative action goals, and we try to meet those goals. And I think we're close, or maybe a little bit above the demographic statistics for Nashville. I think Nashville's about 23% minority. I think we're a little bit above that. In terms of the management team, we try to be lean and mean. I think there are 8 vice presidents that report to me, and that's fairly lean for a company of $1.4 billion. And so I'm a minority. My VP of HR is a minority. And then I've got 4 females also on the team. So we try to follow the demographics of Nashville. But I mean, they're good people out there, and we try to make sure we are the best people.
Well, so, the council this time has, it's 50-50, 50% women, 50% men. And we were talking yesterday that this will be when the new chairs take over. And actually, Councilmember Aaron Evans has joined us. So welcome, Aaron. This group will have the most women as chairs ever, I think, in the history of the Metropolitan Council, as far as we can go back and tell. So really pleased with that. So let me ask you one other question regarding, and it was a really nice statement. I assume you may have seen this, but one of the first things I saw was, particularly during the outages that we had recently, when those, not the tornadoes came through, but that second wave of storms later, where a lot of people were without power for, 2, 3, 4 days. There was a statement, one of the questions came in about how nice the people were who were out there working on these situations. And I want to make sure that people knew that that question had come in. I think the question was, do they get specialized training, because these people were so nice about just dealing with it. And obviously, you know, when you've been out without power for 2 or 3 days, people can be not all that pleasant about it. But the comment was about how nice the workers were out in the field. Y'all do anything special to get those people ready to just deal with situations like that?
You know, we're fortunate. You know, when I talk about the 1,000, I'm proud that you know, most of them understand what they sign up for when they come to NES, and they're committed to it. You know, during these 2 major storms, one of the things that Vice Mayor, you wouldn't know, but something that I never forget. I'll see guys in the hall and ask them, you know, how things are going, and they'll tell me how it's going. And I'll ask them, I said, do you have power? And they said, no, sir. So, you know, it's assumed when there's a tornado or any major event, and my guys are out working, you know, 16-hour days and 8 hours off, then 16-hour days and 8 hours off, that, you know, they're getting up to a hot shower and a nice breakfast. But you know, for the most part, they're going without power, just like we are, just like the other customers are, until we get to their section of town, because we've got, and as you well know, we have protocols, because we figured out how to get power up as quickly as possible. And so we follow those protocols, and everybody understands you follow the protocols. And so we try to get it done as quickly as possible. And you know, and everybody understands that. Everybody's committed to it. And we're just really fortunate to have such a great group of people committed to doing it. And when something like that occurs, I never have to worry about getting people to come in. I mean, everybody shows up. We're a little more sophisticated than we were, you know, back when I first came over here, back when I first started at NES. And we still have categories of storms. But back in the old days, if it was a category 5 being the worst, everybody had a storm assignment. Back when I was the CFO, my storm assignment was to facilitate meals and then answer the telephone. So, I mean, I would make sure that we had meals delivered to the centers and to the main building. And then I'd go upstairs and I'd get on the phone and deal with irate customers. We're a lot more sophisticated now, because we've got a backup answering system that covers a lot of the calls now, but we still, you know, the people that have to be here are here, and they report, and they work their 16 hours and get some rest, and they come back and work another 16 hours until the event is over.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, just wanted to share that nice comment that somebody's made. And I know particularly during that storm, there were a lot of people out there working really, really hard. So I do have the updated numbers on COVID for today. Davidson County, 25,860 cases of COVID-19. That was an increase of 145 from yesterday. 236 deaths. That was an increase of 1 from yesterday. So obviously we're still dealing with it. I know that the mayor is changing a few things in terms of, I think they're still calling it kind of a modified phase 2, but we're still battling through this. So let me ask you how you all are dealing with COVID-19 at NES. Particularly, I guess we'll do this in 2 ways. One is the kind of the impact on the organization itself. But by far, the majority of questions that came in this week for you was, how are people being able to pay for their electricity, their electrical bills? We know that a lot of people are out of work, having trouble making payments. How are we dealing with disconnects? forgiveness, that type of stuff. So basically, it's a twofold question. One is the overall impact to NES because of COVID-19, and then we'll kind of morph into how are people, how are we trying to deal with people who just don't have the resources to pay? Okay.
Okay. So, NES is considered an essential service. And so we're still running 24/7. What we've done is in following the mayor's guidelines, I've got most of my administrative people working remotely. Anybody that can work remotely is working remotely, and it's something that we were not equipped to do. It was something we had to put in place fairly quickly, and so we've done that, and it seems to be working. I'm not getting a lot of complaints. It seems that most of the work is getting done, but it was a big change for us because we're used to being here and everybody sees everybody, and we're very task oriented. So everybody knew the task was being done because they could see it being done. So it's been a cheese mover for us. With respect to my line crews and my field crews, they're still reporting every day. We've modified the shifts so that there are more shifts so that there's not as much opportunity to come in contact with the other guys. And then after every shift, each truck is deep cleaned. My tellers have to come to work every day. We've limited the number of people that can be in the lobby at any one time. They've got masks, they've got gloves, and they've got sneeze shields. With respect to my customer service reps, they're here most days, although we're getting the technology to let some of them work remotely. But we've got them spread out so that there's ample social distancing even while they're here. Now, the bigger question is, what about the people, our customers, who've been impacted by the pandemic? So on March 3rd, we made a decision to not to resume disconnections. And so we have not been disconnecting and have been not charging late fees since that date. And we don't intend to resume until September 30th. Once we resume, for those people that have large bills, we're going to spread those payments out over 12 months to give them 12 months to pay it. Now, that helps for someone who's working, but someone who doesn't work, it's a little more challenging. So our partner, TVA, has a community care fund, and they donated $175,000. Well, we had to, NES donated $175,000, and TVA matched that $175,000. So that was $350,000 available. And that was at the beginning of the pandemic. And so if you saw in the news this week, TVA has done two things. One, it's approved a new community care fund. And so I'll take it to my board in September. Board approval will contribute another 175, and then TVA will contribute 175. And then there's a bigger program where TVA is going to give us a 2.5% credit. And so we're working on a proposal to present to the board in September on that credit, because again, these are challenging times, and unprecedented is the word that I think is often used, and I don't think it can be used too often given where we are. And so it calls for unprecedented measures. So NES is restricted by the TVA, our regulator, and they have to follow the provisions of the TVA Act. And so they have found an opportunity where they can give a credit back to us so that we can help our customers. And so that's unprecedented. And I applaud TVA and Jeff Lyash, who's the president and CEO of TVA, for taking this bold step. And so we're going to bring something back to our board And we hope the community will see it as just as bold and courageous step to help our customers.
All right, so let me ask you this. Do we have any idea how many people are going to fall into that type of situation? I know you talked about the credit coming back from TVA and the money going into the Community Cares Fund. Are there other means, and I'm trying to go back, I know that, you know, we've got CARES Act money floating around. There's other things floating around, any help from the state. Are there programs out there altogether that are going to help these folks? So again, a twofold question. One is, what kind of situation are we looking at in terms of how many people are truly impacted? And then two, besides the things you mentioned, are there some other things that we should be looking at and we can be helpful with at this time?
So, you know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but in very general terms, I've got 55,000 customers that have accounts that are over 120 days old, and that totals right at $22 million. And so, you know, again, I don't know that that's the magnitude of the problem, but again, it's kind of the starting point. Other than the things that you know, I mentioned, anybody that lives in Davidson County that needs help can apply through LIHEAP, through the Metro Action Commission, and if you live outside of Davidson County, through the Mid-Cumberland Community Action Agency. And then, you know, we have, in addition to the Community Care Fund, we've got Project Help. Project Help is a program customer funded where people decide to give $1 per month to this fund, and we raise about $170,000 a year, and so that money is also available to provide assistance.
Well, so let me go back over the numbers again. You said, did you say 55,000 customers or 120 days?
Let's say 55,000 accounts.
55,000 accounts that are 120 days past due? Okay. And that's out of how many accounts?
420,000.
420,000. Okay. And okay, so let's just walk through. And you're saying about $22 million in arrears. That's what it is. Okay. So, so tell me, just so that everybody knows, including the members of the council on this. So, cutoffs are not everybody. No disconnections until September the 30th. We're going to work with all these people. That's a lot of accounts. When is the decision made to actually disconnect based upon, you know, again, unprecedented times, but, you know, what happens? When is the decision finally made to disconnect? And then what does that mean and how fast can they get back on if you know, they're caught back up?
Yeah, so, I mean, let's assume normal times. And so, you know, 30-day arrears, and if you can't make or have not made payment arrangements, we're probably going to send you a 7-day notice saying that if you don't pay us in 7 days, you'll be disconnected. And then we have been able to deploy digital meters now, so we can restore service fairly quickly once we receive payment. So I mean, I think in old days, I mean, you had to pay us and then we had to send out a truck, and that took some time. But with digital meters, and they're fully deployed within the city, so we can get you back up and running. Now, in today's environment, I can't tell you what it looks like. I mean, we're going to have to wait and see, because we've never had a situation where we've had this many people either without jobs or can't go to work because their jobs is not an essential services. And so you know, once we start disconnecting, you know, we want to work with our customers and try to send them to the agencies that can provide the assistance they need. and make payment arrangements. But I can't tell you exactly what that looks like until October. Now, again, just so that everybody understands where NES is, I mean, um, again, TVA is our regulator, and because of the power contract, NES is not in a position where we can forgive bills. So what we will do is we work with agencies that can provide that kind of assistance. And like I said, we, through this Community Cares Fund and through Project Help, we donate to those agencies, but NES can forgive them directly.
So tell me, just because we have people on the call who are, do try to figure some of these things out. And are there some things outside of what you're telling us that we can do to be helpful at this point? Obviously, you can give the project help. We can certainly, it sounds like one of those things is talking to TVA. Are there things that individuals who may be concerned about this, because obviously that's an awful lot of people who are impacted by this, and they're struggling through so many other things. Are there things that we can do as citizens to be helpful here?
Well, I mean, it's all based on consumption. So, I mean, to the extent that, I know these are troubling times and everybody's at home. So, I mean, there's an opportunity to use more, but to the extent that you can reduce consumption in any way, that reduces the size of the bill. And then I think, as a community, I think to those who, are, because the pandemic impacts people different ways. I mean, there are a number of companies in the construction industry that are doing very well right now, and other industries that are doing very well right now. And so to the extent that, you are not suffering from the pandemic, I think, you're inclined, this will be an opportunity for you to reach out to, some of these agencies like NeedLink and try to, make a contribution so that there's money available to help these people that, they really need it.
All right, so let me ask you this. 55,000 accounts, 120 days past due. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Have any idea what it normally is 120 days out? What in a non-pandemic year, I know people have trouble paying, but obviously that sounds like a lot. Is it a lot more than usual because of what's going on?
It's about triple because in February, the past due amount was about $7 million.
Okay. Let me ask you this: the size of a past due, what would we be talking about? Would it be, or do you have any idea what the average amount would be? No.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
Don't have that number in front of me.
Okay. All right. All right. So let me, so I asked you about most everything I had under COVID-19. There was a question about public housing and whether people in housing like that, do they have an electric bill just like everybody else? Is there any differences that go through in terms of how those bills are paid?
It depends on the unit. I mean, some units are master billed, and so we bill that unit. And so when MDHA makes a payment, it pays for the electricity. But I think some of the newer units, the individuals are responsible for electricity. And again, to the extent that we're aware of those people, we make sure that the need links and the different entities are aware that they're there. So if there is a problem, then they can reach out to them and try to provide them assistance.
Okay. All right. So we've got about 20 minutes left. There's a series of questions, and I'll go through them and spend a little bit of time on each one that people had asked. I thought they were interesting. Some questions about the growth of the city overall. Obviously, even with the pandemic, there's still cranes everywhere, and we're doing a lot of building. This has more to do with kind of outside the downtown area, and there was particularly a focus on Hermitage. As the city grows and it grows bigger and everything, how are we doing infrastructure-wise with NES, and are there You know, are we able to keep up with the demand as the city grows?
That's a great question. And, you know, I think the thing that I would say is we have a 20-year, what we call transmission and distribution plan. And we look at the forecasted growth in the different areas of the city. And we try to make sure that we build our infrastructure accordingly. As I explained to you, our capital budget is $180 million. Back when I started, it was more around 40 million. And so what we do is we're in the infrastructure business, and we understand that we're in the infrastructure business. And so I've got a plan for enough growth, anticipating that everybody is going to turn on every light in the house, every air conditioner, and every device at the same time. So that's the way we plan. And so we're fortunate. We've had to move 3 projects forward. In the downtown area, we've got what we call our network system. And there was a 4-feeder network system in the convention center area. We had to expand that to a 6-feeder network. There was, and you mentioned Donaldson, but there was, we've got a project to put a new substation in the Donaldson area, and we purchased land for that. So that land is available. And Councilman, as you know, if people know I'm coming, prices for things go up dramatically. So we bought that land, and we bought it at a good price for the ratepayers because people didn't know we were coming. And so that's how we try to manage it. We try to stay out in front of it. You know, we've got a few hot spots, and we've got projects to address those hot spots. But I think the thing you can take comfort in is, I think it was last summer, we had one of the hottest summers on record, and there was no mention of brownouts or rolling blackouts. So, I mean, that lets you know that, you know, we've got the type of infrastructure in place to meet the demands of the city.
Any besides, I know you talked about Hermitage and Donaldson, Antioch, other areas that you see, not that I'm trying to tell you where the hotspots are, but I assume what you're doing is you're trying to forecast where the growth is going to go, and you're trying to make sure that you have the land and everything else ready to go so that we don't get caught in a situation where all of a sudden we're trying to figure out how to make all this stuff work.
Yeah, and to give you more detail than probably what you want, you know, in our 20-year plan, we're looking at 3 things: capacity, asset management, and reliability. And so capacity means, you know, do I have the infrastructure in place for the scenario that I mentioned where everybody turns every device on? So that's number 1. 2 is asset management. The devices that I have in place, where are they in terms of their useful lives? Do we have a plan in place if a major transformer fails? And we do. We've got transformer backups. And the last thing is reliability. And so we have a statistic that we watch, and we look at those customers that are interrupted with more frequency than others and trying to understand why. And so we put projects in place to try to deal with those issues. So those are the 3 things that go into what we look at when we put in our 20-year plan. It's not just capacity, it's capacity, asset management, and reliability.
Okay, all right. Switch over to efforts at clean energy, green energy, electric vehicles, people actually creating energy and selling it back to the grid. Where are we with this whole notion of trying to become more energy efficient and much more attuned to green energy?
So that's a great question. One I get, you know, challenged on a lot. So let's go back to the TVA discussion. So TVA is responsible for all generation and transmission in the valley, and that includes distributed generation, which would be green energy. And so what we've been doing over the years, we've been working with our partner, TVA, and with the city to come up with the types of programs that can meet our green energy needs. And so it's a challenge for TVA because TVA under the TVA Act has to use the lowest cost, or has to provide the lowest cost energy that they can provide. And so they've tried to be creative in finding opportunities to use renewable energy so that we can meet the goals of the different communities and still stay within the constraints of the TVA Act. So, when you look at what we're doing locally, we developed and constructed and is now operating the Music City Solar Program. It's a 2 megawatt solar farm off I-65 in Due West, and it's the largest solar array, I think, in this area, and we're proud of that. It was in partnership with the council, TVA, and NES. The council provided the land. It was an old brownfield that was located out there. And so we were able to build on an old brownfield, 2 megawatts of renewable energy that will be here for all generations to see. We're working with TVA and the city, and we had early discussions before the tornado and the pandemic on a smart cities initiative. We think it would make, because again, the city is bombarded constantly, and I'm sure you get calls every day, Vice Mayor, from someone wanting to sell you some type of lighting. And so what we think makes sense is to have TVA involved and NES and TVA, and then we look at this bigger issue of smart cities and what should the lighting landscape look like, and obviously it should be energy efficient, but what other things should it do for us? And so we're going to be again, TVA has agreed at a high level. We're just having initial discussions with to do something with Nashville, Knoxville, and I believe Memphis and Chattanooga to study and try to put together an 18-month roadmap to do that. But again, that's one of the things that we're doing. Then TVA has these programs that try to meet the needs. One of them is called Green Invest. And as you know, Vice Mayor, the city just signed a Green Invest program. And what that does, it allows an entity to, working through TVA, TVA sends out the RFPs. It gives an opportunity for the entity to see what's available, and then you pick your project, and then they'll build and construct a solar array in somewhere in the Tennessee Valley to meet the renewable goals of the city. Now, the reason why it's structured that way, the Music City Solar Program is 2 megawatts, just 2 megawatts, and it took up 10 acres. And so to put in, like a 55 megawatt array, which would be more in line with what the city would need, you'd need somewhere 350 acres unencumbered. And I think that's not to be found. So that's why this program is available. And then they've got the Green Switch program, where if you have annual consumption of say 1,200 kilowatt hours a month, for $12 a month, you can invest in this program and completely offset your carbon footprint. So those are the types of things we're doing. And again, it's all through TVA, since they're the generator. We're not the generator. But I will say we just entered into an arrangement with TVA where they're going to allow us to, when I say us, NES, to have distributed generation up to 5%. Now, still don't know what that means, but again, that's a great opportunity to pursue some of the types of things that I think we might want to pursue as we go forward.
Okay. Well, let me, I'll switch over for just a second, but maybe they're all connected. But reliability in terms of NES and power lines, and I know we have lots of new developments, particularly on the, growing on the kind of the outside of downtown. How do we ensure reliability? There was a question that came through on the chat box about burying more power lines, which obviously stays away from the trees. How do we deal with this? And if people are concerned about reliability, what is NES's response to, this is how we make all this stuff work better?
Yeah, that's a really good question there. I mean, we track our reliability, and we follow standards established by the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, IEEE. And with respect to those standards, we fall in the first quartile with respect to restoring power, and the second quartile with respect to what we call system outages and individual outages. And then, as I explained before, we have these other statistics we track to try to improve reliability for those customers that are impacted more frequently than what our average is. Now, the challenge is in Nashville, and like most people, we love our tree canopy. We love our trees. And so, I think when Mr. Wilson was on the board, I think maybe prior to it, he was responsible for assisting in drafting a tree ordinance. And so, an underground ordinance, I apologize. And so, for new construction, everything is underground. But for the infrastructure in the inner city, underground is really not an option. I mean, it's time and expense. Because if you're going to bury the lines, you got to dig up the street, and we're on limestone. And so that's really not an option because it's, it just takes too long. And you just think about the transit system. There was some thought of putting, 1 mile of the system underground, and it was in the billions of dollars. Well, think about, 700 miles of line underground. It just would be too costly. So in terms of reliability, we're looking at those things, and we're looking at things like distribution automation and things like that to assist. But the thing that is the biggest challenge for NES is trees. If you look at the two major outages we had the tornado, and it was devastating, but it didn't hit tree-lined areas that bad. So we only had 50,000 customers out. When you look at the derecho, from a financial standpoint, I think we're probably going to spend less than $10 million on that. But I had 150,000 customers out. The only outage that was larger than that in my career was the flood. So, but again, it was primarily trees. And so, we work with the neighborhoods. I have an annual tree meeting with the neighborhoods to talk about trees. So we have educational materials to explain to people where trees should be planted, and we have a tree trimming program. And so we try not to be as aggressive as some utilities. And when I say that, we have a 10-foot buffer between the trees and our power lines. Some utilities have 15 feet, some have 20 feet. But in terms of reliability, that's probably the biggest challenge for us is we love our tree canopy. And so what we've tried to do is strike a balance where, we, try to, have a standard that seems fair, but, we're not draconian. Now, again, I mean, to some people that love trees, I think they would call us draconian. So,
let me ask you the reliability issue again. If there are, do you all assume there's a way to determine which areas are having trouble for whatever reason with reliability of power? If there are specific areas that are having trouble with reliability, what is the best way for them to at least let you know what they're running into? And you all may be watching that as well. How do you deal with that? How do you make sure that the issues are addressed correctly?
As I explained before, we keep statistics, and what we do is we're always looking at what we call our worst performing circuits. And so for each of our worst performing circuits, there's a plan to address that area. You know, and again, it's easy if it's related to equipment or infrastructure. It's a little more complicated when it relates to trees. And so, and most of our worst performing circuits are in, you know, the areas with the most trees.
Okay.
I think one of the questions was, it said, my power continues to go out even though there's no storm. They're probably on a circuit. There's a tree somewhere on that circuit, and that tree is bumping against that line, which is causing a momentary outage.
Well, it may be, obviously, we talked to Laura Smith and Antonio Carroll quite a bit. I think it's one of those things where if people are having problems, we send that information through. So if there are problems of reliability, let us know and we'll get them to you. All right, last question for you. Somebody had mentioned Knoxville, I think, has gone, all their downtown lighting has gone to LED bulbs. Are we doing anything like that? I think it's more expensive at the beginning, but then it saves money over time. Are we doing some initiatives like that?
Well, that's the study that I mentioned earlier. You know, we're hopeful that we will engage into a pilot program, partnering with TVA in the city to do a smart city study, smart lighting study. And, you know, the hope is it's, you know, because as you know, these lights do more than just have lights. I mean, they've got sirens and cameras and all these other things that could, you know, provide real value for the city. And so the question is, you know, as we look down the road, let's let TVA, you know, partner with us and help us make the right decision for the city. And so we, as I explained earlier, we had initial discussions with TVA and Mike Jameson on this issue, and I thought we were making some progress. And then the tornado hit, and all other things have hit. So it's on my to-do list to see where we are on that. But you know, there've been other priorities right now. But again, it's something that has all of our attention, and it's something that we plan to address.
Well, DaCosta, we are out of time. It is just right before 11 o'clock. I appreciate you taking the time this morning. It's been really interesting. I hope people have enjoyed the conversation. I know I learned quite a bit. You all stay safe during COVID-19. I know you got a lot of employees that are out there doing a lot of stuff, and I want them to stay safe. And the rest of the NES family, thank you all for what you've been doing. I know seems like 2020 is just, I keep saying that we need to celebrate New Year's Eve next month. So we just go ahead and get rid of this year and move on. But thank you for your time. Everybody else, thank you for being on. I will tell you again, we are not on next week. It is Labor Day weekend. Enjoy the holiday weekend. I hope it's a pretty one for everyone and a safe one. And then on September the 12th, we're going to have the interim chief, John Drake, the police chief. John Drake will be our guest, and I know there'll be a lot of questions for him. So anyway, again, DaCosta, have a nice rest of the weekend. Thanks for spending the time today. Everybody else be safe. And again, thanks everybody, and we'll sign off.